So I would just like to talk a little bit about radical filmmaking with you. It's, as you know, our main topic, our main focus this year, and also about how difficult it is to get recognized, noticed with a film, as well as the difficulties of funding and financing when a project is maybe not that streamlined. So I would like to start with a general question to all of you. When you're starting a project, a new film, do you have the audience in mind? Do you think in any way about how the project could or should be perceived? Who wants to start?
Uh, can I hear the question once again?
Well, when you start a project, do you have the audience in mind? Do you think about how the film could be received, perceived, should be perceived?
I have vision how it should be perceived, but I'm not thinking about the audience, and it was other persons were complaining about that, and that I'm thinking I'm doing movies mostly for myself, which is quite egoistic. But with this movie, I started to try to cooperate with audience. So I think we will see in future how it is. But yeah, I think I think it's very comfortable to do movies for yourself, but it's quite egoistic, and sometimes this effect of this work is non-digestible for any other people. So who knows?
Do you cooperate with the audience?
I guess when I'm making the work, I don't really think about the audience too much, because it's kind of I like making the animation because it's really therapeutic, and kind of it's a bit of a cliche thing to say, but kind of gets you away from the real world, and it's nice to get a bit lost in it. But when you're kind of putting everything together at the end, it's kind of impossible not to start thinking about the audience and the timing. So when I'm actually animating, I don't really think about it. But when I'm at the end putting everything together, I try to sort it out a little bit and really start to think about what's going to work. And but I have such different reactions from my films. Like some people just sit there and just absolutely just completely blank face, don't really like it at all, and then some people are laughing loads, and so I don't know. I try not to really think about too much about the audience now, because in the end, not everyone's going to like it. So once you get that out of your head, you kind of feel a lot more free, I think, as well.
Well, in my case, when I start to work on any project, I don't really think about what people will think about what they see. But also at the end, so after I finished the images, I finished the editing and sound and stuff. I think a bit, because I work a lot on like, let's say, how you perceive the perception, and how this mental visions are shown, like into moving images. How actually a lot of stuff that I do is comes from mental images that just happen to pass through my head, and then I try to transform them into like video or whatever. So at the end, yeah, I think I'm asking myself this question: what the general? It depends, of course, of the audience, because you cannot think of all the audiences. So what people might think of that, yeah, I'm kind of asking myself, but I don't change anything So I just try to imagine sometimes. Okay, don't think this kind of people would like this kind of film, but whatever.
So, Randy, do you want to add something to this?
Maybe. Are we going around the
Yes,
table?
why not?
Okay, okay. I've been thinking a lot about audiences, actually, because I don't actually show people film so often, and I think that the audience for, like, experimental short film doesn't actually exist. There isn't an audience now, or ever was. There's this kind of false idea that there was at some point an audience of interested people, which has come from the canon of experimental film, but the fact was there wasn't an audience then. So my way of thinking about audience is more figuring out a way to get people to watch a film that might be just an experimental short film that they wouldn't watch, and how to do that. And that's been so far to work with a musician or to use music in some way, and then to kind of trick them into it. And then that allows me to kind of make these other films that I don't really show anybody, that I just kind of put under my bed and keep making compulsively without having to worry about anybody seeing them, as long as I can make those one or two every couple of years that somebody might watch or might help make those other compulsive things happen.
All right.
Yeah, I guess I agree. There's not, for me, there's not really an audience, at least a commercial audience for short films. So it doesn't, for short films in itself, I don't ever have to think about my audience. And I guess that I have, though, at least, I've remained writing some kind of like unlikable characters. I want the film to be likable, you know? I mean, even if at some point you think, I mean, I sort of feel like the way that I write my films and then my films itself are like that friend who's like the asshole, but everybody really is like, you know, he or she is also like very, you know, like likable, and you want to sort of still hang out with that person. And so I know, I think when I was younger, I actually had every interest in repelling my audience, you know, like I really thought, like, if I can get 10 people to walk out of the theater, then I've done my job. And as I've gotten older, I don't want people to walk out of the theater anymore. I mean, I want people to say it was very tough to like that protagonist, but I was totally cheering for him or her the whole way through. So, yeah, I don't want anyone to walk out anymore. But for short films, I agree. I don't think you have to consider your audience, which is a huge liberation.
But do you have to consider maybe a professional audience, like festival programmers, curators? Is this something you sometimes have in mind?
Not in the film.
Well, but would you say, Jennifer, just to because it was your the last statement, would you say that you had a very radical approach when you were younger, more radical approach maybe? Was it important for you to make the film, yeah, like not likable as well as being radical?
Oh, for sure. So, I mean, when I was in graduate school, the project that was my thesis project was a live action, like a live action comic book about a girl superhero named White Trash Girl, which is maybe a something, I don't know if that's a term that exists outside of the U.S., but you know, she was just disgusting. You know, she was really disgusting, and that was sort of that was like her power. And I had every intention of, I mean, I really wanted to evacuate the theater, you know, and irritate all of my advisors. I mean, at that point, I was influenced by Jack Smith and John Waters, who I think had some of the some similar ideas about, you know, like if you can stay to the end, then there's some sort of a payoff. But I had no interest really, maybe it was a kind of like my punk rock beginnings or something, like not really wanting to please my audience. And I think that honestly, I'm still making the exact same story. I really think that my protagonists are there's still a lot of white trash girl in them, but you know they've gotten older and their kind of superhero tactics are maybe less disgusting, so the audience stays till the end. But but I don't want to make it easy for the audience. Maybe that's the radical part, you know. Like I just don't want to make it. I don't want to make easy films, and so yeah, I think that there's still something that's a little like aggressive in me. You say radical, I say something like, you know, aggressive in me that wants to give my audience something that they have to, you know, deal with.
Maybe one of you want to add to this because did you change from like the first project? Did your approach change from the first project to now? Do you consider the audience maybe more now, or?
I can say about repulsing the audience that the previous like basic version of my movie contains a 10-minute shot when sun is going up, and I was arguing with producer that it must be 10 minutes and that I really want to audience to be really tired after that. So when the sun finally comes up after this darkness, they can feel oof. But maybe this is my not a radical part. This is because of working with producer that sometimes he can say no, and this time he said no, and because this short film will be 10 minutes longer, so there is no middle length movies festivals, so this is not to send it anywhere.
What was the question again, really? Like,
If your approach has changed over the years, do you think you have been like more aggressive, as Jennifer said, when you started?
okay, yeah, I'd definitely say a lot more. I wouldn't say aggressive. I'd say a lot more impulsive and a lot, if anything, caring less about the audience when starting a film anyway. So I used to, believe it or not, my first few films I made, it was quite storyboarded, and I used to think, oh, that would be quite funny, and that would be quite funny. But now it's a lot more impulsive. I just kind of, each film's getting even more and more reactionary, and yeah, I think if anything, the more confident I get with the medium, the more I'm confident with myself and with my own work. So I'm more, like, I don't know, a bit. Yeah, I guess I'm just learning more about the medium, and once you know you're confident in yourself, then it's you kind of know it's going to be okay in the end. But especially with my films at the moment that I'm making, I'm not sure how they're going to go down with the audience. So it'd be interesting if they get into any festivals, what the reaction will be, because it's a lot more, I guess, fast and a lot more things going on the screen than my previous work. So it's a lot less timings involved in things.
My first works, I never ever really changed the way I work. It's just that in my first works, the topics were a bit more, let's say, darker, and the way of showing images was a bit less. I didn't really care about the structure. So, but meanwhile, I'm a bit more interested in editing. And I try to like have to have one film with the same, more or less about the same kind of concept, because before I was mixing all of the things. It was much more freer, but it's still not. I don't really think about the audience. I mean, it's with the audience. I say I have the more or less the same relationship when I create. I mean, I don't really care. So, but it's not that. But it's not because not because I want to. Because my films, you can watch them. I mean, it's not too trash or not too violent, like not too radical, like experimental stuff. But still, I just because I think if you start to like imagine all the audiences, what they would think about it and what this festival might think about it. I mean, it's not your real work anymore, and you just have to adapt. And I know there are who adapt to festivals. So I know there are directors who make their films thinking about that.
But do you have, like Thomas said, there is a producer, for example, who doesn't want you to do
Actually,
certain things?
with producer, it's a funny story because I never really have a producer because even I officially work with a producer, but he never gets money for my films. So it's like not having a producer because I always have to do it on my own.
But he still says no sometimes?
Sorry?
He still
But
says
he
no
cannot
some-
say no if he's
He
not
doesn't bring
getting
him money. Did any of the others had experience like with producers who, of course.
So I guess I forgot to mention that, like back in graduate school when I was trying to make this thing that would repel everyone, it sort of did the opposite, So when I showed this disgusting white trash girl, 8-minute video, the advisors were like, it's fantastic. It's so great. And, I was like, what? Oh, no. And it, like it really, people loved it. And so at some point I realized like, oh, all right, like they're up for it. And so there's also, so I know now, it's not about necessarily now like repelling people, but I know that audiences want, they appreciate a little punishment.
So, producer experiences.
I've never worked with a producer, so apart from the work I did in my college days, that's not really a producer though. So, but no, it's just completely self-funded project, so never had to deal with that really.
And problems with funding?
Yeah, massively. I've never had any funding. It's mostly because we got a very right-wing government at the moment in the UK, and they cut all the art funding about 5 years ago, so there's just no funding at the moment really. So, like, Channel 4 were doing Random Acts, which is like a funding program where you get £3,000 for a short. But apart from that, there's been absolutely nothing, especially for work that I do. It's like, I don't know who would give me money to do it, so maybe I just haven't been looking hard enough. But no, I got a part-time job and I just managed to survive just doing that and working on my work in my studio in spare time, really.
An interesting thing because I've intentionally tried to avoid any kind of producer or something like this, and I think that there are other people trying to do that as well, and there are a few angles, but it requires a certain amount of like thinking around to things that don't really seem to make sense. So for me, coming to Austria was one way to find better funding, and I didn't really know the extent to which it would have been available here, but then it does exist here in a much different way than it does in a lot of places in the States, especially for non-medium specific short film once you've shown something that you've done already in the country. So it's quite inaccessible as an outsider, but I think with some amount of kind of intentional integration strategically, certain things become more available. And I think that you can find access to funding in quite non-traditional ways, especially through academic contexts, which are quite global in their reach, but also really kind of poorly represented by the kinds of people that are typically going towards those positions, which are making often very traditional work in general, I think, globally. So by showing something a little bit different, I think it opens access to people who are kind of coming from a different place, seeking funding that's non-commercial but pretty viable. And often it requires going somewhere that you might not have gone, or kind of extending or doing something you wouldn't have done, which is also good exercise, I think.
But have you been confronted with like discussions at the during the funding process, or about the content?
No, because for some of these organizations, the fact that you've made a film that was partially funded by them, and that film is shown in public in either their country or your country or wherever, then it offers an opportunity for promotion for them, for some way for them to show that with their funding has some sort of obvious, visible, tangible relation to the place or to the world. And it's typically these places are funding highly academic things which are existing in a much less visible world. So to have something or somebody making film for them is, they don't really care so much what it is. Most of the time they don't see it, but if it's shown somewhere or if you make an effort to show it, then they get much more interested, because then it can say, oh, funded by this, this, and this, and then they get 20 more applications the next year, and that for them is good. So it avoids this question of content typically, in the way that you can't really avoid it when you're depending on a commercial means or a producer or some sort of industrial mode of production.
So Jennifer, this maybe brings us also to you, because you're doing a Kickstarter now.
Yeah.
And this is maybe also good a good chance to not have to discuss the content with a funding institution, for example, or someone who wants you to do changes.
Well, on the one hand, I would back up and say the worst experience I had with the producer was like when an ex-boyfriend was like, I want to produce one of your films, and he had a production company. I was like, okay. I mean, we broke up and stuff, but he's like, it's fine. And of course, like, it really ended in like a production meeting where I was like in tears and hollering and, like, take my name off everything kind of a thing. It was personal. It wasn't like, clearly was not professional. So I've learned my lesson. But still with Kickstarter, the thing is, on the one hand, we chose Kickstarter, I would say, because you actually have to agree to certain things up front. And there's other crowdfunding sites and sources, obviously, like in the States and worldwide, but we wanted to go with Kickstarter because the donators or the supporters, it just seems like it's sort of more serious on the one hand, right? And I have a producer now who's more like the project manager. Like he's not putting money in, but one thing he had to do, for instance, is like, so in the States I have to go through, I'm using like SAG actors and Screen Actors Guild actors. And so we have to do these kind of elaborate contracts with them. And SAG actually has to approve the script, and they might scrutinize things like a 15-year-old in a bra, or a 15-year-old girl in a bra, or whatever. And so, but my producer never says like, take that scene out of there. He's just like, I just wanted to give you a heads up. Like SAG might be curious about that, and so we might have to have a conversation about the content, the context of that scene or something. And so the person I'm working with right now, again, who's more like a kind of line producer or, like overall kind of project manager, his primary job is really to kind of protect me, and to keep my script intact, keep my creativity intact. Through official channels, sometimes just say, I anticipate that this might, give some of these other people kind of some pause, but I'm here to, kind of protect you. But absolutely, it's also the case that with Kickstarter, nobody who gives, $10 or something gets to say, I don't like what you've done. And the thing with like crowdfunding is that, I've learned through some research that they fund people. They don't fund, I mean, certainly there are people who troll around Kickstarter, I guess, I don't know, in the middle of the night. Some people get high and like go shopping on eBay. Some people, I hope, get high and go like on Kickstarter. But mostly, that's my market, my new market right now. Like the middle of the night stoners. Yeah, totally. We've got like 20 days left, and I'm like, I'm totally going for the stoners. But mostly it's the case that, and I love that crowdfunding is really, they support people, and sometimes it's humbling, right? Because it's like your grandma who gives you $10, but it's $10. It's not, it's fine. And so, in that regard, I also appreciate that I've not then like alienated my entire audience in the course of being a filmmaker. That right now I've got like a really good fan base who are, want to be part of this project somehow. And everybody who gives even $1 gets a thanks in the credit. My editor was like, "Are you kidding? Like, how are we going to deal with that in the credits?" And I said, there's no stipulation about like the size of the font, or it's like little tiny, it'll go quickly or something. So yeah, and I don't want to, this is like I've said to myself, this is my first and only Kickstarter. But it's been a good learning experience, so far.
Have the feeling that you have to be like more, in that case, coming back to radical, to promote a project on Kickstarter, to promote it to an audience who maybe also doesn't know you yet, just to be recognized, just to be noticed at all?
Yeah, but I guess I personally don't have a problem with that. Like I also just think I'm a little bit of I'm not so much like a networker. But I'm on social media. I can be kind of a loudmouth. So, I can be really aggressive. Like maybe it's passive aggressive on social media. Constantly like blasting, or like sending emails. I'm not so good in person. Like, hey, you should fund my Kickstarter. But I've been sending every day. I get online and send these like, hi, what's going on with you? Lately. Like I'm very good at that part. I can sort of turn on that. It's not fake charm, but it's like I can be a kind of like I can be passive aggressive in terms of film funding, and I'm doing it for the next 19 days.
Has one of you experienced crowdfunding?
Do they have, I know that Kickstarter is probably sort of international, but it feels like it feels really state centric. I don't know if there's something that's like a kind of a Euro version of that.
There are some, yeah.
I think the funding in Austria is quite good, even if the people here complain about it, where they haven't really resorted to that. Because, I mean, dealing with like a totally different system, right? You might get some money from the state, but essentially you have to self-fund everything or have a sufficient amount of investment. Whereas here, I mean, I know of people who have made one short film and they've gotten 9,000 euros to make their next short film, which may or may not even show anywhere. And that's simply through one application and writing a good budget and a rather short synopsis and limited CV otherwise. So I think it's just coming from, at least for Austria, that's my most specific experience, but I don't know in other places. I mean, I guess London, it's pretty dismal, but there doesn't seem to be many people using crowdfunding or things like that.
Well, it's something that I've thought about doing before, but I don't know, I'm not sure. Well, I've got friends that have done, Kickstarter. I've got two friends doing it now for a series called Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. And they've, and it's, Hug Me, I'm Scared. It's really good, but it's like £96,000 they're trying to get, and then I think it's going really well, but I but then the pressure then to all those people funding, and for me, I don't know. I think subconsciously it would affect the work in a way. I think so. I don't know. Maybe it's something I should think about doing, but because there certainly isn't any funding in Britain in other sources. But again, it depends what you're doing. I guess the work I do is just not what the council are really particularly looking at. So I don't know. Maybe I should change my work completely.
You shouldn't.
Well, I thought about it because I have some friends who do this internet funding, but I think I don't know if it's French, but if there are French websites, but I know two. I heard about two European, like Kiss Bank. There's one like that, and one Ulule. I think it's French. But it's yeah, it sounds funny. But it seems like working. Yeah, it seems like working. They got some money with this Ulule. But I didn't try it yet because my latest project is quite secretive, so I don't want to share much about it on the internet. But maybe in the future I will try this thing. Because for like the official funding, I think in France they have the most money for films in Europe, maybe in the world, but I never get anything. It's not for me because I don't know. We have to always make a lot of not synopsis, but a lot of script writing. I mean, they're really interested about how do you write your script. They don't really care about the film actually. Because when they see the applications and stuff, really you really have to write it in a certain way, and it's generally the experimental films don't really get too much money from the official funding.
So you don't work with a script or anything like this?
But anyway, since I tried, but it didn't work. So I said, if it's anyways not working, so I wouldn't bother to write too much about the project. But maybe, yeah, I think one of the next things I will do, I will try some little internet crowdfunding.
Have you had experience with this, or do you have to care about the funding, or is this your producer who's doing this?
In Poland, it's working also quite well. Of course, many people are complaining too, but still it works. Like you are giving them project, they read it, and they giving money or not. But like there is funny points to that this movie should promote, I don't know, your country, or you shouldn't put non-educative parts into your project. And so for example, my new movie will be about drug dealer, so it's quite not for children, but so you must somehow cheat these people from this office that this will be against narcotics, so please kids don't take that pill, and because you will feel bad. And so this is some kind of game to with some tricks that we filmmakers share what to write in this form to they will catch it.
All right. Getting back to the term of radical, because it should be the topic, not only the funding and the money. The term radical cinema has its origin in the U.S. from the 60s and 70s, and the women's movement, for example, it took a stand against racism and sexism, homophobia. So is this political part of like radical cinema, this political cinema. Is this would you say is this still relevant in a way? Is this also something that you think would be important to force?
Well, I would say for me, yeah. I mean, I really feel like to go back to, White Trash Girl, which is, she's very old now at this point, but it was very much about even though the form of it is much more kind of like John Waters, Jack Smith, it's like the form of it is really raw and sort of handmade, but there was a social justice component, kind of calling to attention representations of race and class and gender. And I still do that. I mean, the stories are very different, but for me in particular, I'm not the kind of activist who's like on the corner with a poster. So I do feel, and my films are not per se, political documentaries or something like this. They're narratives, which I think, offer some sort of lyricism or magic or poetry, right? But there is also a sense of like consciousness raising in them, and a sense of thinking in particular to my films about how cinematically women and children are portrayed, and I feel really sensitive to to how race and class is portrayed cinematically. So that's always something, for me at least, I'm always like, checking it, not to make something that feels politically correct by any means, really the opposite, but to really to think about the politics of representation, and to have an agenda, again, even within this kind of, lyrical or magical script. For me, that's always really important. And maybe in particular, kind of representations of women, or that I make films from a feminist perspective. I don't mean to, I feel like sometimes when I say that just is like, that's the repellent now. People are like, nobody cares about feminism anymore, or feminist films, and I don't know, I think it's the word. I think it's the word that's dusty, and in a way it's like my job I do it every day to like dust it off and be like, no, feminism is sexy. It's like the sexiest thing right now. We're all feminists, right? And in that, I think there's radicalism in that, just because my films are more like highly produced, they look nicer, like at my soul and my core is still like this really feisty, 19-year-old in combat boots who's just like, I'm gonna kick some teeth out.
Peter, you mentioned the conservative politic in UK. So
Well, I think it's still really important for people to make films with radical views and things, but I don't know really what to say about the subject too much. I just think it is just really important for people to do what they believe in a way, in a cheesy way. It's like, what's the point just doing what's already been done? Everyone has their own views, everyone has their own opinions, and the filmmaking's one of the best ways of showing that in a way. So I think go full ahead, do what you want. So if you really believe something, do it.
Well, we should talk about like radical. I mean, because
maybe about the political,
or the fact
political,
that it's political.
the political level in their work. And
Yeah, I cannot really talk about it because I'm not very into politics. I mean, it's I mean, for me, radical filmmaking could be also like something which is totally like ununderstandable by the audience, not really something which is somehow connected to politics. I mean, it could be also something which is. I mean, for me, the films that I like the most is the films that I see, and I think, well, it's I don't know what it is, and I never seen something like that before, and the films which are quite out any possible context. I mean, I cannot say it's like a political critic or something like that. I don't know what it is. Yeah. And for me, it's also kind of radical because the directors who do this kind of films, they really into their own they really believe in what they do because they're doing it, and they really don't care about how it could be perceived. But about the political, I don't know. It's funny because I made a film which everybody says is very political. I'm not sure, but anyway, it's a lot about oil, and there's a lot of burning oil in it, and still, I mean, it's anything but like pro oil stuff. It's most on the contrary because there's a lot of about pollution in it. But still, they selected it in Dubai in a festival. It was very fun. So you know, even sometimes these kind of funny things could happen, even if it's like most. I don't know why they shown it there. I mean, well, but yeah, I cannot really. I heard like critics who said that. I mean, art critics who said that any image is political. Anything you do, it becomes political. I don't really subscribe to this thing, but that's why I cannot really talk about the I mean, the intrication between the idea of radicalism and politics. But I know I don't have this like background of any political. How do you say? Sorry, I haven't been involved in any politic activities. Like I'm
Yet.
totally apolitical. Yeah. Yet. Who knows? But, yeah.
I think it's somewhere kind of in a place between what Jennifer's saying and what you're saying, because I think this position is not apolitical in itself, and not in the sense where it can be generalized to the point where everything becomes political. That's far too relative. But where if you make something with sleek production values, but then that has this sort of element of undermining traditional representations of certain groups of people in images, but with this way of doing it, that then becomes a much more powerful sort of political point in a very specific way than a politically charged documentary that says this is a political documentary about the representations of women in cinema or in general, because that itself is becoming sort of ineffective, I think, in just today's image culture. This doesn't work anymore in a certain way, and that's, I don't know, so there are certain filmmakers that kind of fit there that would have been very effective at a certain point, but after that rhetoric has sort of lost its pool, then there becomes the need for a different way to be political, which is not this relativist sort of position of everything's political or apolitical, but something else existing within a paradigm, which there becomes a very interesting point for both radicality and politicality, because it's something else entirely that becomes possible. And yeah.
Sorry, I was thinking about something because there's a kind of paradox in this radical and politic thing is that if you make radical films with a political message, you don't have much chances of showing it for too many people. I mean, I think it's quite paradoxical because you basically restrain the possible number of your audience. So it's, I don't know, if you want to pass a message, political message, it's not a good idea to make very radical films. I don't know.
I don't know. I guess I would. I mean, I would disagree a little bit. I feel like I've been. I mean, maybe it's different. Well, I don't know. I've been at a lot of festivals, you know, especially overseas, in the past 5 months, and I feel like I've seen a lot of. I mean, experimental docs, but that have a real political agenda. Maybe analyzing a massacre, an upheaval, a riot, something like this, and it's not. I'm not necessarily the audience for that, but I think that there are programmers who, nothing against programmers, but you know, who think that it's really important to kind of represent certain agendas, you know, and from certain countries, for instance, you know. I mean, everything I've seen has been very, you know, they've been good. There's not been sort of like a lazy experimental doc about a massacre in South Africa, you know, by any means, you know. But I've actually seen, you know, I just feel like I've seen a lot of, you know, short experimental docs about pretty specific things, both historically and contemporarily. And I think where we don't see necessarily the kind of, you know, like a kind of radical agenda is in the narratives, and I don't know, like that's where I put them. I mean, I'm not, you know, I'm not a documentary maker, but I scrutinize every scene for sort of like what that, you know, what that means to put that image into the world for me, you know, and maybe that's at the risk of saying that that's something that a female director has to consider, or that myself as a female director I consider really specifically about, because my films are also about women, and how do I disrupt all of the, you know, pardon my French, really fucked up images that exist, you know, that sort of like represent, you know, women, that are made historically and also now in experimental films, in art films, in commercial films, you know, out in advertising and whatnot, you know. So that, you know, I feel like that's really important to me. But yeah, I guess that I've seen a lot of really like agenda specific shorts recently, you know, that are like winning the prizes. And sometimes I'm sort of like, oh, of course that won the prize, because that seems like no one wants to be anti that, you know, that thing that happened. I'm not saying that then that means it was a bad film, but you know, there's some times when I'm like, I don't, wow, okay, I guess that you know, that a little bit, yeah, a little bit. That sounds dismissive. I don't mean for it to, but there's like something, there's some equation there, you know, that I have to think about.
And that's the kind of I know this sort of, I don't know if it's an approach, but I think that is the kind of unradical, apolitical way of dealing with a very political topic. This way of making that film that is very relevant, very time specific, right to the point, but at the same time totally missing the point. And I think that's why this sort of exploration of places within narrative then becomes much more relevant to the actual issue that might have been addressed very explicitly in these kinds of films that are often very successful, but which to me seem to totally lose the point of the existence of the film in the first place, and which also ceases to be relevant at any point after its creation. Festival award or not, 5 years, it's like a headline in a news story versus a piece of art. And there's a very substantial shift that happens between those 2 points, and it's not related to the time specificity of either of them, because they're both very specific, but there's one that does something that the other one simply cannot do. And I think that these overtly political, topical, sort of political documentary or something like it simply don't make that leap to actually becoming relevant for a time beyond the point in which it exists. And that's, yeah, so I think I like this idea of going somewhere else then, to a narrative, to something else, and then doing it from your point, your perspective, in a way that can't be done by somebody else.
I saw, is it called Sabota? Oh my God, that just blew my mind. So it's part of the international competition. It's like a 30-minute, I don't know, docu-narrative. I'm not really sure how to describe it, right? But it's about Heinz Swoboda, right? Who was this pimp in the 70s who like was a very bad man in the 70s, you know, like beat his girlfriends, beat his hookers, you know, maybe murdered some people, went to prison. And like not my kind of guy. Not anybody's. I mean, not any of you guys is kind of guy. You know, I'm not gonna say like, cause you guys like that's your guy, right? No. To humanity, a bad guy, but the film, who, it's not a documentary, right? But it kind of is. I mean, it features this sort of talking head footage of him, maybe reflecting back on his life as this bad guy, but then the maker like disrupts it with a dramatized character of like a fictional interviewer who's interviewing him. So she's fake. Maybe even she's representing the director. I'm not sure. I don't want to know because I like the mystery of it. But so there's this fictional interviewer in real life interviewing this guy, but it's really set up like a fiction, but he's really the guy. So at the end credits are like him as him, but he's still a pretty good actor. And anyway, I think if had been a documentary, I would have been like, why are we giving this guy any kind of FaceTime at all? You know, like, fuck this guy. But because it flipped it into, in a way, a kind of a fictional situation, I entered it in a really different way and was really blown away. And of course, Maria and Doris, they were like, what did you think about that one? And I said, I loved it. And they're like, you did? And I said, I really did. But I think that's where a different approach to that subject matter, I would have just been shut off, you know? And so the way that that director, you know, approached it to sort of bring in this fictional element, I was captivated. And that's radical.
So maybe let's make a last round. I guess because one thing that came up quite often was now this the experimental things. Maybe you all are working with experimental in a way, more or less. Would you consider the experimental part, the animated parts, as maybe a good? Well, how should I say it? A good key to radicality, maybe. Let's put it like this. Who wants to start?
Are you guys all animators?
I'll work with animated elements at least. Yeah. or with experimental film. Who wants to start?
Can you repeat, please, the question exactly?
Okay.
So
I'm sorry. It was.
no, but I want to hear it again to be sure.
If I just wanted to ask if the experiment or the animation part, if this is maybe a good key to radicality.
I don't think it's related. I mean, if you want to make radicality, I mean, to get to radicality, you can do it with or without animation. I don't think it's just a technique thing. I don't. I mean, my animations are not really like the animation in traditional sense because I try to make it as realistic as possible. So I just try to blend it with the real footage. But it's just a mean to express myself. I'm talking more about myself in this thing, but I don't think they should be related. I mean, for example, yesterday we had a program in the animation avant-garde, and there was the first film Um, Holy Fuck, that was the name, and it wasn't. There was no animation in it, but it was quite radical film. So I don't think it's necessarily related. I mean, I don't think so.
I'd say I totally agree with that statement. No, yeah, it's just it can be radical easily without animation, and no, it doesn't really have an effect on it. I don't think.
Maybe I should myself. I haven't managed to make myself clear. It was clear in my head, but it was more about getting away from the totally realistic approach, getting away from like just having. You know what I mean? I'm a little tired, so it's really hard for me to yeah, to finish even this question or this sentence. Did you get it? What I meant, or
Not really. Sorry.
not really? Okay.
Okay, well, I would say okay, so for instance, I've seen your film actually several times, and as I've been touring the world in these festivals, and so I think that, for instance, you're able to portray, your protagonist who seems to be like part fish, part boy, and I think to try and do that live action could be really difficult. And it might not even occur to someone who's just primarily invested in live action to have a scene, for instance, when he's waking up in the middle of the night with this knife taking the scales off, which is really heartbreaking and really a visceral. It's a fantastic scene, and I think so. Maybe animation, or I'm live action, but I use there's animated parts in it to kind of disrupt the reality of it. And so I think that there's something about being not having to adhere to the laws of reality. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Fantastic, right? We should be together all the time. That that maybe help to realize these just other ideas, right?
I hear that question often. Why didn't you shoot that movie by camera? But that will mean that I will prepare, I don't know, some kind of silicone mask, and I want that scenery in that way, but without all of these ice cream advertisements on this beach and something. So of course there is freedom to prepare everything from scratch and with some area of uncertainty, because you see this character and you are not totally sure it's just bad drawn or he's a half fish, or I try to achieve that effect, and but like thinking about animation and radicality, it's good to think what is more radical, to go somewhere and shoot a documentary in rain in something, arguing with people. They said don't record me, or just sitting in your home behind your computer and drawing images. From one side, this can be radical because this gives you total freedom of expression, and from different side you not touching this real life is kind of secure sometimes.
You don't know, okay.
No, I like this sort of self-awareness of the difficulty of being radical when you're using an interface of a computer and being alone. And I think that too many people now kind of overlook that and get lost in this sort of world that you create in this system, in this device, without realizing that you're totally alienated from the creation of this tool that you use on every level, right? I mean, have no role in the creation of anything computer related because it's so removed from us on a very simple industrial scale. I mean, there are minerals in these devices that we can't mine, and every point of this interface is premeditated by some other person who benefits from it no matter what's produced. And I think that doesn't really exist as much in other art forms or in other mediums. And I'm quite curious about where things go now with just computer digital interface, and I don't see it as having this sort of utopic thing that is so often read into it. And I think that it's important to be aware of this isolation from the world at the point of creation to make this thing, and what that might mean or not mean, or how it could be reflected as a symptom of now, of this point in history where we're becoming really alienated from the tool that we depend on, and the tools that we depend on for almost every aspect of daily life, and what the radical means for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you, but it's also funny to think that you might spend like 6 months totally alienated and doing your film, and that's quite radical too. I mean, if you stay every day and night in front of your computer, it's a radical experience also. Yeah.
No, and I guess I would say just a little to sort of like rewind, but then also fast forward to your point that right. So I mean, I feel like I use these elements that break through. It's not the fourth wall, really, or I don't know. It's the fifth wall. But these elements that kind of break through, that kind of burst through the narrative, that are whether it's someone singing. The way I'm describing my films, I feel like you guys would never. They're like, I'm never gonna see her film. Those sounds terrible. Just singing and feminism. Forget it. They're really good, though, aren't they? So good. I don't know. Okay. But I try and also have these like bursts of like non-reality that come in. On the one hand, because we just don't have that in our life, you know. Like I sometimes wish that we had, like, if you like fell over, that like little birds would like come around your, or if you liked someone, like little hearts would kind of burst above your head. I mean, I really want that sometimes for, you know, us in real life, and so I kind of interject some of those into the films, which, you know, again, I mean, they're kind of polarizing. Like some people are kind of like, get rid of that shit, that's awful, you know, and then some people are kind of like, oh, I really like that part. But then, you know, to kind of your point, it's also it's real frustrating, speaking of then going even back for a little bit further in our conversation about funding. You know, I mean, I was just asked I was invited to submit something to what's called the New Frontiers Story Lab, maybe New Frontiers Story Lab at the Sundance Institute, which is part of that festival. But you have to submit something that's like tech-based, right? So it's like new ways to tell stories, you know? So I was like, what is that? No, seriously, it really is like, so then I was just like, and that just happened this week. So I was sitting out on the plaza like, I don't know anything about apps, and I don't really care about developing an app that would help you tell a story. Like I actually, as much as I am addicted to my iPhone, this conversation, like face to face, in person, I mean with mics, still an interface, is much more enriching. And I think that, you know, but there's still that need, kind of like the next big thing is going to be whatever this other tech tool is, and I just don't believe that. And it's not because, you know, like I'm an old lady or something. You know, I even think that you know, my college age students would sort of say the same thing, like the future is not in apps, or, you know, I don't know what they think the future is, but yeah, so the sort of like the kind of tech tools really just come and go. And I think that what stays is maybe something that helps connect us more clearly. I mean, I still feel like computer or like tech tools at their base are always driven towards how to get porn to people faster, or how to like dating services, you know? Like on the first night I was here, a woman said to me, she was like, do you know Tinder? Do you know this Tinder application? And I was like, I've heard of it, you know, but it's like, I feel like that's where people are putting investments in, but it's still about sort of like connecting with another person. or hooking up, I guess. I still feel like it's connecting somehow at its base. It's right. But do you know what I mean? So it's like, I don't know, like I feel like there's like that's where like tech happens first, you know? Is like how to get that human connection back.
Well, thank you for this human connection here. Thank you very much. Was a pleasure for me. I hope it was good for you as well. And